so fucking... Yeah, I need to put a stock on it. It's so fucking smooth. Well, hello there.
Hello?
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Have you ever met that Terminal E6 that is too stubborn to quit, but also too stubborn to change with the times? An optic that makes you question the price point despite knowing it will deliver on its promise within its capability. The optic that's made fun of by newer offerings with none of the experience, ability to thrive in harsh environments, or service history. The optic that established what a rugged LPVO should be. An optic that helps stack enemy combatants at range for almost a decade in the hands of Special Forces operators.
665 atomic penetration, rapid fire through your skull. Shot it home, we're taking it back to the days of trying to lose control.
The LPVO that's more badass than any of us. Welcome, friends, to the Trijicon VCOG 1-6 review. First, I'm going to run down the specs like I usually do. Starting off with the weight, which is 23.2 ounces. Add about an ounce for this cram piece of metal I got in there to make it lower 1/3. But keep in mind that 23.2 ounces includes the integral mount. So you know exactly how much weight you're putting on your rifle, not, hey, this optic weighs this much and the mount weighs this much, so collectively it actually weighs this much, but when I tell my friends, I'm only going to tell them what the optic weighs. Your overall length is 10.05 inches. Your overall width, with the turrets obviously, is 2.51 inches, so 2.5 inches. The height is 2.73 inches. Your magnification range is 1:6. Your objective lens is 24 millimeters. Your tube diameter is 30 millimeters, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I know someone's gonna kick my ass in the comments about it, but I believe it's a 30 millimeter tube. It could be slightly smaller. I don't know. This is a first focal plane optic with a field of view at 1x at 100 yards of 95 feet, and 6x is 15.9 feet, which is pretty tight for those of you that know. For reference, a Night Force NX8 at 1x is 106 feet, which is 11 more feet, and at 8x, which isn't really comparable to 6x, but at 8x it's 13.2 feet. So I'm assuming it's going to be slightly better at 6x. But the Eyebox and eye relief, which we'll get into with the VCOG later, is far superior to the NX8. And the VCOG is like 14 years old, so that's more of a hit on the Night Force than it is for the VCOG. Also, while we're here, I know it's going to come up, the Trijicon Credo 1-6 first focal plane red mill has 113.4 feet at 1x at 100 yards, and at 6x is 18.8 feet. So that's pretty massive respectively. You're looking at an 18.4 foot difference at 1x and almost a whole 3 foot difference at 6x. So you're going to get a lot more field of view with the Trijicon Credo. But that's not the whole story. Let's keep pushing. Your eye relief is 4 inches, and it is absolutely every bit of those 4 inches. It's a very nice eye relief once you're behind the Eyebox. This reticle is the Horseshoe Dot 223 77 grain MOA BDC. Your adjustments are 1/4 MOA. The turrets are capped MOA turrets, so they match the reticle. They have 90 MOA total travel, and it's 35 MOA per rotation, which we'll get to eventually. Battery life. This is the best battery life LPVO that's out. The Illumination has 6 settings. They're all visible. No night vision settings are available. Your water resistance is 66 feet or 20 meters, which is the most rugged in my inventory. The parallax is fixed at 100 yards or meters. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. And that's what I think it is, because it's very on par with other optics that have that fixed parallax. The housing is 70-75 forged aluminum, which is the strongest that they use in optics. All right, turrets, controls, throw direction, and magnification range. Your turrets are interesting. So they are capped turrets and they are labeled. So what's nice is it gives you the zeroing ranges for 25 meters and 100 meters, what this will do. So it's 1/8 of an MOA at 25 and 1/2 MOA at 100 meters. So I'm assuming that the parallax is 100 meters and you're supposed to zero at meters, not yards.
What? Oh my God! Who told you?
You'll also notice a complete lack of any numbering whatsoever. This is set for the lowest common denominator, so if you want your impact to go up, you go this way, and if you don't want it to do that, you go the opposite way. The turrets are very positive and high effort. You'll notice that they're not audible though. This is absolutely a set it and forget it optic. There's no having 2 zeros, because even if you paint it, you're not going to have numbers for reference. So 1 round, 1 0, you might be able to, make your corrections with a suppressor, but some optics you can run 2 zeros for 2 different grain weights or 2 different rounds, and you can mark the optic and just make quick adjustments. That is not happening with this. This is, you get your 0, you leave it the fuck alone, and you keep trucking, because there's nothing on there. Your windage turret is exactly the same, except it says impact to the right, not up. So, very simple. Definitely caveman, return to monkey. Just make the bullet go where I want it to while I'm zeroing it, and figure it out through the reticle from there.
Apes together, strong!
Which is really what you want an LPVO for anyway. This isn't something you're gonna be dialing with. It's, oh shit, my zero's slightly off, let me make a couple adjustments and keep it moving. The Illumination turret has 6 settings and is very easy to move. Very positive detents. There's an off stop in between each of the power settings. There's a little arrow that's molded into the housing, so it allows you to see what's going on, where your illumination is. Red is very aggressive to my eye for whatever reason, so I don't really run it on 5 or 6. I usually keep it around 3 or 4. Some of you guys out there really like knowing it's on, so you run it on the highest setting always. I tend to run it a little softer, so it just creates contrast and not create the aim point bright, wholly purifying light that everybody looks for. I just need a little bit of contrast to get my hits. All right, it's gonna be kind of hard to see with the wrap on here, the OD green wrap, but your throw direction is left to right, and it's pretty high effort, not gonna lie. It's not Vortex Razor Gen 2 high effort, but it's not Gen 3 light either, or Night Force light. It's very similar to the Trijicon 1-6 Credo. You have 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So magnification happens pretty quick, and you do have a fin that's built into the optic. This optic literally gives you everything you need and nothing you don't. All right, eye relief and Eyebox. So your eye relief is 4 inches. It's a very generous eye relief, and it's as advertised. Even when you adjust the eyepiece, I don't feel like you lose any space like you do with other LPVOs where they list, oh, it's between 3.4 and 3.8 or 3.5 to 4. It's you get all 4 inches of your eye relief with this optic. Now, the Eyebox is pretty tight, and what's available to you in the optic is very tight. And what do I mean by that? When you look at other optics, I'll compare it to the Credo here. When you look down the Credo, you feel like the optic's very small, you're looking through a wide optic, the eyepiece, and all that stuff works with you and gives you a large field of view. You'll notice that with the Vortex Razor Gen 2, there's the PST Gen 2, there's a lot of LPVOs, even my Trijicon 1-8. You'll bring it up and you'll say, hey, that's a nice field of view. Even the Vortex 1-10, I guess. Still mad at that optic. But you bring up the optic, you see that you have a nice field of view, and it feels open and roomy. But when you bring up the VCOG, it's a very precise, narrow field of view. You feel like you're looking through a paper towel roll when you look through it. So what's available to you is already tight, and then the Eyebox is a little tighter, but it's definitely not NX8 tight. You can absolutely work with this optic. I don't feel as constrained as I do with the NX8. I will tell you that I'm not an NX8 fan. I know some of you are. I have never used that optic well. I've never enjoyed it. It's not an optic that I like or recommend. Attacker 1-8 all day, but I'm taking this optic every single day, as evidenced by what's on my rifle, over an NX8. And while the tube and field of view is comparable-ish, with this being tighter, this feels more usable. So the Eyebox isn't necessarily as tight as the NX8, but the field of view is less than the NX8. So you might run them side by side and be like, what the fuck is he talking about? He's crazy. But when you start using it more often, especially in different shooting positions or conditions, especially low light, you'll see that this glass is better because it's shot glass. So very flat image. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the Eyebox is tight and the overall view through the optic is tight, but it's still very usable. All right, for real this time on the glass clarity, image quality. Glass clarity is phenomenal. The images are very flat. There's no fisheye whatsoever. And the light transmission, despite being a tighter optic, is very true. I don't feel restricted, and I can hit exactly what I'm looking at 6x. It is tighter, but it does focus me for more precision shooting, if that makes sense. It's not ideal for situational awareness or multiple target identification or anything, but if I need to hit something specifically, then I find it at like 3x and then zoom into 6x and I just tap it, whatever I need to hit. So image quality is fantastic. The light transmission feels like the P4XI, where it's way better than it should be given the specs. And the objective lens and how tight the optic is, it's a very clear, very strong, very tough glass. I will say though that there is a slight magnification. Before I got to mess around with the Credo, I thought this had very little, if any. It was the closest to a true 1X I've ever looked through. The Credo is definitely now, after having messed with it, the closest to a 1X I've ever seen. But this is pretty good, not gonna lie. It's like a 1.02, very slight, and it's definitely less than my P4XI or my Trijicon 1-8, but it is there. So if you use it, you'll see it, but it's so slight, just ever so slight. All right, the reticle. Usually I cover optics that have one or two choices. The VCOG has so many different reticles available that you can really just get whatever you want. And they've developed multiple reticles over the years, so I know guys are like, well, they never made that reticle. Well, they do now. So there's a mil reticle for it. There's 55 grain. They have stuff for 308. There's a whole bunch of reticles out there. dealer's choice. This one has the horseshoe. It's reminiscent obviously of the ACOG, but also gives me the crosshairs to draw my eye into the horseshoe. So it's a very precise optic, gives me a lot of capabilities, and it gives me information I need. And while I would like some wind holds, this is again an old optic, so it is what it is. But I really do like this reticle. It's very quick for me, either on 1x, just running it, or stretching it out to distance. Illumination. Again, it's not daylight bright, but it's pretty good. I'd put it just a touch above some of the newer offerings. It's obviously not going to be aim point bright, so your P4XI, your Vortex Razors, your Attacker, or NX8, it's not going to be that bright, but it's wholly adequate. So it's daylight visible and a touch above what most people will call daylight visible. So you can definitely see it much better than the Trijicon Credo series, the AccuPower series, any of the primary arms optics this shits on. So you're going to be able to see the illumination better, and it doesn't bleed at all. I've never had any bleeding issues with this illumination. It just does exactly what it's supposed to do. Maybe in low light, but I don't run it super bright in low light. So those guys that like melting their retinas in low light with the highest setting, you might have some issues. I found that it illuminates exactly what it's supposed to illuminate, which is the horseshoe and the center dot, which gives me exactly what I need. All right, obviously, I always say whether it's a 3-gun / hunting optic, a tactical optic, or a military optic, this is Trigicon's military optic, the COG series. Be it the ACOG or the VCOG, those are bomb-proof, run them over. You don't get more military than a VCOG or an ACOG. All right, what it's good at. Where I just left off, bomb-proof, and a perfect fit for a return to monkey caveman like myself.
I'm retarded?
You can't break it. I'm sure a Marine can find a way to break it, but most regular people won't break this optic. Glass clarity and image flatness is superb. Every time I look through this, it's exactly what I need to see. The colors are true, absolutely zero chromatic aberration, hyper flat image. It's just exactly what I need. And I will say on the next point, it's easy to get behind despite being tight. Putting this little cram in there, and thank you to Florida Man for introducing me to these, but putting that cram in there, getting it to lower 1/3 made it perfect. It put it exactly where I needed it. I was kind of scrunching down a little too much when it was at its stock height. So putting it at lower 1/3 is precisely what I need. I get behind it in every shooting position, and it's just, I bring it up and go to work, which is what you need in an LPVO. You can't be, fidgeting around trying to get your eye relief right or trying to get the Eyebox right. You need to be able to pick it up and go to work.
Go!
The next point, the illumination is solid for me. It's not going to be for the aim point guys, but realistically, if you're using it the way it's designed to be used, you're fine. I know not everybody's a fan of Trijicon reticles, but the crosshairs draw my eye to it despite not being illuminated, so I can use it more effortlessly than some of the T-shaped reticles, which is funny because I prefer a T-shaped reticle, but some of them are either too small or too big or something like that. There's always some sort of factor where I'm fighting it, but this optic is big when the reticle's small, and it's small when the reticle's big, if that makes sense. So it gets out of its own way. I don't feel restricted by the reticle, and I can do anything I need to do when I'm using it. And overall, I found it very easy to use. But again, reticles are extremely subjective. You might look at it and say, not for me, which is completely fine. Next point is it's very easy to install, no mount worries. You can get a Geisley Super Precision if they're in stock. But you can get a Geisley mount for it if you want to dial out any sort of concern you might have with the attachments, but I've never had it come loose because I torque things properly. And you also don't have to worry about over torquing rings. There's some guys you cannot expect to properly torque rings and they just clamp the shit out of the optic, which impedes the operation of the optic. It won't let the turrets track properly or rotate or do their internal magic to move your reticle where it needs to go. So there's some guys that'll over torque their rings on their Badger or their Geisley or whatever, but they'll over torque the rings and it's just squeezing it and it screws up the optic. You don't have to worry about that with this. So if you have one of those buddies, make them get a VCOG. The batteries are easy to replace in source. It uses the Energizer lithium battery. Make sure you use lithium batteries, by the way, no alkaline batteries, they swell. Ask me how I know, but use the lithium batteries. In this, you don't want an alkaline battery because it'll swell and it'll bind everything up. You won't be able to get your battery out. So use the recommended batteries and the orientation is right there. So easy mode.
That was easy.
And lastly, combat tested and still holds up in the modern market. I know a lot of guys blow past these, and especially with the price tag, but this optic still holds up. I bought it used and I have no qualms about using it. It's been very good to me and it's on one of my rifles that I use all the time. So that's saying something. All right, what it's bad at. The price point is still pretty crazy. It's the same price as a new 1-to-8 VCOG, which blows my mind. These are good, but they're not, you know, there's a lot of options out there. So to stay competitive, I'd probably shave a couple $100 off that price, man. Especially if you're charging what you're charging for the VCOG 1-to-8. I wouldn't make the VCOG 1-to-6 the same price, especially with the field of view limitations and how other optics have progressed and this one really hasn't. I'd probably lower that price. I mean, you could dominate the market with these at 12 or 1300. People would be like, why would I want the razor that I have to use my warranty on versus the bomb-proof optic at the same price point? You know, just think about it, I guess. But Trijicon, you know, they've been good to me. I'm not gonna talk shit, but they're probably not gonna listen to me on that one.
You serious?
Next point, and what it's bad at, is the housing doesn't protect the glass as much as newer offerings. So you very quickly run into the glass. I think there's about that much protecting the glass in the front, and then about what you can see that's black is the distance between the air and the glass. So other optics have a longer bell housing that protects both, and that's what people have become accustomed to, and it prevents a lot of oopses. This, you can have oopses very easily. Luckily, the glass is shot glass, so it's much higher quality, but you can still scratch the shit out of or damage your optic because it doesn't have that extra protection. So a lot of guys opt to screw in the kill flash. I like from a tactical perspective, but don't like from a trying to look at what I'm trying to shoot perspective, because it has that like weird fuzz thing that it does, but it does protect the front of the optic. I mean, it's not a surefire protection, but it's an added layer. So there's newer offerings that are going to protect the glass a little bit better, but they're lower quality glass, admittedly, so it's one of those trade-offs. Next, your field of view, as I've hit many times, is very tight. 95 feet at 1x is not a lot. You definitely feel it when you look down this optic. Every time I bring this optic up, I'm like, wow, I can see exactly what I'm pointing at, and not much else.
Fuck.
So you definitely feel how tight it is every time you get behind it and bring it up. But again, it's crystal clear and a flat image, so that's very important to me. And no bending at the edges, no chromatic aberration, but you cannot escape how tight it is when you look down it. So you spend a lot of time on 1x looking for stuff. I run it at 3x a lot, but when you're at 6x, you ain't seeing shit but the thing you're looking at. You're looking at an individual person at 6x. You're not looking at anything else unless it's further out. 300-400 yards, you're gonna get a little bit more, but 100 yards, no. Another thing I don't like is the turrets aren't numbered. I kind of hit that earlier, but it's a spin it till you get there. You're immediately getting lost in those turrets. There's no dialing, there's none of that. It's you zero it and you see how much you're off and you make little adjustments and then save it. That's it. You set it and forget it. Personally, I like knowing how much I've dialed into the optic to let me know how much I have left. I have no fucking clue how much I have left in these turrets because there's no markings whatsoever. And they're not audible, so you need to really pay attention when you're zeroing this thing. The BDC, now BDCs in general, this is a general complaint for BDCs. I usually get mill reticles. I don't mind MOA, but I usually just get mills because that's what everybody's got and it's what people are used to calling out. So, but BDCs are only accurate for what I'm guessing for this thing is a 16-inch running Mark 262. I just zero the center dot at 200 yards, which is not what they recommend. And I use Straylock to figure out what the rest of it is. And then I check it. But BDCs, they're designed for one thing and one thing only, and that's what they're gonna run. Always check it with Straylock and then check it at the range. That's my recommendation. But BDCs can definitely be a hindrance, especially when you're doing a stressful shoot and you're trying to remember what 2 actually is, because it's not 200, it's like 289, you know, or something like that. And I do run, this rifle's zeroed for 75 grain. I have run 77 grain through it just fine. But again, it's only good for exactly what it is. So a TMK is going to do better than a 262 because it's a tipped Match King and it's going to fly better. So it's not even going to be true for that. It's going to be whatever 77 grain they decided to zero for, which I'm guessing is 262 because that's what the guys had access to that were downrange. Lastly, the mount is absolute unless you install a spacer or run it on an HK. So I'm not running it on an HK, so I installed the spacer. And I know everybody wants to go as high as they possibly can, so unless you're putting stuff in there to bump it up or putting it on a secondary rail or something like that, you're stuck with absolute. So to change it, you know what you gotta do, but other than that, it's absolute. All right, in closing, finally, right? Very few optics have been tested as hard and proven themselves in combat like the VCOG. It's not the best field of view or Eyebox, and maybe even Illumination if you like your retinas seared, but it's holding its own in a constantly evolving and changing market. When I bring it up, I never feel it's unusable at a particular magnification, but I do feel the constraint. The glass is phenomenally clear and the images are very flat, which is what you want. You don't want any distortion, it throws off your shots. And I've never looked at a particular distance and felt, man, I finally reached the edge of this optic's capability. It's always crystal clear, can always see what I need to hit. And it's in the most hard use housing available. A bomb-proof optic that has withstood the arduous tests of time and keeps delivering superior results. It's definitely an excellent 1:6 first focal plane if it fits your requirements and preferences. I do recommend it, though there are caveats. The field of view and the price point for me are the biggest detractors for this optic, as well as the turrets. Those are probably the 3 biggest complaints I have. But outside of that, if those things don't matter to you and it fits all your other requirements, then absolutely take a look at the Trijicon VCOG 1:6, and it'll definitely serve you well, and it's a very hard use optic. As always, thanks for watching. Take care out there.